something that might have taken me a week to do previously, I just wouldn't do because I'm like, I don't know
Right.
what the payoff of that thing is going to be. But now I'm like, I can do that in 30 minutes and see
Yeah.
and just see.
Hey everyone, welcome back to AI for Good. Today we're going to talk about automating AI tools and getting them to communicate together. And Sam, last week we talked about what AI is good at, what it's not so good
Mm.
at, and we were talking about like what were some of the aha moments that sort of got us really excited about AI and feeling like things have changed. I was actually talking with somebody about this a couple of weeks ago. Like when I first started learning about how some of these automations work with things like Zapier or make.com, I had that same sense that I did, a couple years ago
Mm.
when ChatGPT first came out, where it was like, okay, this is a big deal. And so, yeah, so we've been as a team, we've been diving deeper into automation stuff, trying to figure out the best way to implement it in our workflow. And so I thought we could talk about that a little bit today.
That's perfect. So let's just back up. What is automation? Like, what
Yeah.
does that mean?
Yeah, so there are, I mean, at its simplest level, it's a way of having technology do a certain task for you. Um, Things that like are on that you have to do repeatedly, recurring tasks, things like that can be set up, be scheduled, or certain tasks that are triggered by an event.
Okay.
So it's maybe easier to like look at it as an example of how it works and one of the ways that we've been using it. Um, for example, one of the automations that we've set up is if we respond to a certain message in our Slack channel with a dedicated emoji, which we've chosen a potato with a cowboy hat, uh,
Cowboy potato.
cowboy potato, that creates a task in our to-do list based on the message in the Slack channel. But where AI comes into account is it passes through an open AI assistant, which reads the Slack message and translates it into an action item. Because
Mm.
it's not like natural when you're just having a conversation in Slack to like speak like in to-do list. um, so this reads the message and it kind of comes up with a basic set of to-dos based on the message, and it just automatically does it. So I just hit the potato emoji and then it creates that to do in our task list. And that's great because then you're not working for the purpose of working, it's just
Right. Right.
doing that task for you.
Which then opens up the doorway into 100 or 1,000 different ways you can use something like that. So
Yep.
you can send a Slack message to your AI assistant who can then wash it through another AI assistant bot for like
Mm-hmm.
content. Like
Yep.
instead of the cowboy potato, you could have the cowboy finger up emoji emotion or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
then it sends it to a different bot that then starts a whole other chain of actions based on that trigger. And so yeah, it's really endless what you can think of it doing. But one of the other
Yeah.
case studies we're using it for is taking transcripts. Like we record a lot of our meetings with an AI assistant. And so those transcripts can be sent to a database that can be
Mm-hmm.
then scoured for content ideas that can then
Yep.
be developed by other bots and then even refined for different outputs like for social media or blog
Yep.
posts or newsletter articles or an infinite number of things. And then our human person can then just go into that well of content that's already kind of been pre-worked
Yep.
and find the ideas that fit the need of the moment and really then turn it into content that's really, ready to go pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you're working with content, copy, or and you're doing these kinds of tasks where you are repurposing things for
Mhm.
different marketing purposes, this is a huge help, because as we're saying, it just we can set it up in a way so that it is automatically repurposing the work that you've already done, and then categorizing that into different folders for different uses. Because this is something that you would be doing day in and day out, right? Is creating different folders and in Google Drive, and copying and pasting from one program to another and sort of rewriting it. But this just will do it instantly.
Yeah, and you're also adding to that the layer of specialization. So, like,
Yep.
if you're wanting to move into like LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, you can create bots that embody best practices for those platforms
Yep.
that are then reading that content through those best practice lenses and then creating sort of your pre-content. And
Yep.
it's already got, okay, this is the way you speak on LinkedIn. This is versus how you speak on Instagram or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and then even just for like general administrative,
Mm.
like the kind of stuff that occupies a pretty large amount of your day, if you're sort of in a especially like a remote kind of job where you're on your laptop all day. It's like one of the things that we've done is we've set up, and so all of these tools have kind of like integrations with each other. That's kind of one thing that we're learning too. And this is a little bit of a side note, but that is definitely a philosophy that we've tried to develop
Mm.
in our organization, is like having flexibility by sort of dipping your toe into different things rather than going all in on a single platform. But
Right.
we can maybe bring that up in another podcast. But a lot of these platforms now have these integrations that are built in with each other. And we've been using Zapier primarily, although we've been using make.com a little bit as well. But one of the integrations that we've created is, this is just another example for us, but we have an AI note taker in our meetings. So we have the meetings transcribed, like you said, and then we have a Zapier automation that takes the meeting notes that are generated by AI. Here's what was talked about and who said what, and it goes through Zapier, goes into a Notion database, which is like a table, with the
Mhm.
different columns saying who said what and what the notes are. And then what you can do is then have another layer of automation where, as soon as that new meeting populates in the database, you can have Notion's built-in automations say here, oh, mention like this person, you can assign it to this person. And then the status says new. So because it's new, you're going to notify the director of your team to say this meeting happened about this. And so all of these little pieces that kind of take up a lot of that mundane work every day, you can have kind of just rolling. So you can, again, like something we say over and over again, but you want to be able to bring your whole self to the most creative and sort of life-giving parts of your work, and this kind of helps you do that.
Right. And in like those meeting notes, one of our sort of the learnings that we've had over the last year of using an AI assisted note taker is that people rarely go back and rewatch a
Yeah.
meeting. Even if you miss the meeting, don't tell our
Mhm.
bosses this, but even if you miss a
I was gonna
meeting,
say, I watch all. I'm just kidding.
you tend to skim the meeting summary notes, which is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
It's gets you up to speed on what was covered without sort of sitting through a lot of the discussion, um, rabbit trails and things like that. So
Yeah.
it really becomes a both productivity and efficiency. It helps, especially a dispersed team, stay on
Yeah.
top of a lot of things that are going on without having to spend anywhere near the equal amount of time of sitting in those same meetings. And so, we're also trying to think through a lot of people as you begin to coordinate cross team projects need to be informed, but they don't
Hmm.
necessarily need to be present for everything. And so this
Yeah.
enables you to give a TLDR to somebody
Yep.
that just needs to stay in touch. Like, okay, I see what's happening. You guys are progressing. This is great. Let me know if I need to help you in any certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I've been thinking about was I can hear somebody saying to themselves right now, like, well, are you actually working at all at your job? If you're setting up all these automations,
Mm,
and that was kind of my first thought too, was I was like, this is definitely taking up a lot of time, a lot of what people's entire job is.
mm,
On our team, we all juggle so many different spinning plates that this is kind of like necessary for us to be able to perform. Yeah, anyway, so I could see somebody being a little bit skeptical of this. Like, is this cheating? But what I've actually found, diving into this for a couple of weeks now, setting up these automations. Yes, I'm replacing some of the mundane tasks that I did, but that was kind of like the entry
mm,
level stuff.
right.
What I've found is that it's actually getting me to now think like from a not a higher level, but like stepping
Yeah.
back and thinking about how these different parts of my job can be connected in an interesting way. So it's like it's challenging my understanding of my own work, because now I have these tools that are available and I'm like, oh, I can do so much more actually. And I can really make this I can make my work a lot smarter because of this.
Yeah. No, that's one of the questions we've had since the beginning of this podcast is uh, will AI replace the learning phases
Yeah.
that we all kind of go through? And will that be a downside or not? And what I kind of hear you saying there is like replacing kind of the more mundane tasks actually opens up opportunities for higher levels of work, higher levels of
Yeah.
thinking about your work, higher levels of integration, um,
Yeah.
cooperation, participation, uh, that you might have just never gotten to because you
Yeah.
were stuck in the mundane 20, even 30, 50% of your time. If you're
Right.
able to automate that, then what do you do with that freed up time?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that it requires intentionality there. And so yeah, I think with as with any tool, there are people who are going to use it to just uh not have to work as hard. So I get that. But I
Yeah.
do think, like, if you have the intention to, I want to be more creative, I want to be more productive, more creative, I want to have more fun, and I want to think
Mhm.
more deeply about the work that I'm doing, that's where these tools can really help with that. And it can it can aid in the learning process rather than a replacement of the learning phase.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit. You mentioned fun there, Dylan. Sort of the difference between playful work and
Yeah.
drudgery work.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to see that a lot of these AI assistants, and now as we're moving into automations, create a sense of potential playfulness around work. Like something that might have taken me a week to do previously, I just wouldn't do because I'm like, I don't know
Right.
what the payoff of that thing is going to be. But now I'm like, I can do that in 30 minutes and see
Yeah.
and just see. And so it opens up sort of this playfulness. Like I've just been seeing this, like I've been having to do these SWOT analysis, whatever you would say, SWOTs.
Analyses. Yeah.
before I was kind of dreading, oh no, I'm gonna have to sit down and go through all my notes and da da da. And I
Yep.
realized, oh, I've recorded all these meetings. And so I just pulled up my specialty bot that I use for this kind of stuff and said, here's the transcripts for all these meetings, analyze each team's SWOT, break it up, tell me what's unique to each of the teams, what's shared by all of us. And it
Cool.
was instantly there. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that would have taken this whole time period that I've
Hmm.
set aside for this project to do just that. And I did it in
Yeah.
10 minutes. I mean, I had
Right.
to have the meetings to start with, but the
Yep.
work product was done. So then I was talking with the person I'm reporting to on this morning, and I'm like, hey, that's already done. What could we do now with that to move us further down the road?
Hmm.
And that moved it more into a much more playful sense of like, okay, the to do is done.
Yep.
Now what can we imagine needing to do based on this?
Because it drastically reduces the risk involved with experimenting
Mhm.
with something, at least in terms of the cost of the time and energy.
Right.
Because, like you said, the task took 10 minutes instead of 2 weeks to do. And that's valuable time that to your organization, that if you can't maybe chase down an experimental rabbit trail for two
Right.
weeks if it ends up going nowhere, but you can spend 10 minutes doing that.
Right. Or even an
So
hour or two. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And this is something we've said before, is like you waste hours so that you don't waste years, and I think it's important to have that mindset when you're doing this. But I love the way you put it, that it allows you to have a sense of play because the costs are not as high now
Mm.
in playing with ideas. And going off the play aspect of this as well, I was pretty intimidated by
Mm.
setting up the automations, So we experimented with a couple of tools, but as soon as I started digging into Zapier, it's actually pretty. So I'm, again, just for our listeners, I'm not a technical person. That's not my job, but yeah. But I got into Zapier, and they actually make it pretty easy to set up simple automations. Of course, they've got tons of articles and videos helping you walk through it and things like that.
And
But
they've already prescripted some of them. So like the more common
yes,
ones have already been set up.
indeed. And then a lot of the tools that you're using as like triggers or events, they'll have their own built-in APIs that communicate with Zapier. So they'll help you walk through it as well. But the other thing that's so wild is that Zapier has its own built-in AI copilot. So you can, so you can use the copilot to explain the Zap, which is the automation that so you explain the automation that you want it to make, and then
Mhm.
it just makes it for you. And like you kind of have to like maybe go back and forth a little bit and fill out some of the fields, but so
Right.
even on that level, it's like we're using AI to help set up. It's like a recursive Escher painting or something. It's like you're using AI to help you set up your AI automations. Yeah, the hand drawing itself. Um, but it's yeah, it's so crazy. So
Yeah, and I
but
think this is an important point. Like you do not have to be a coder
no,
in order to use these tools. And
nope,
you can start with something very simple like move this piece of data from this Google sheet to this Google sheet.
yep,
You know, it could be as simple as that.
yep,
And I think with everything we're telling you guys, it's always just start small, just get moving, and then you'll figure out the next step. And so we got to automations because we felt super comfortable with creating GPTs and started to
yep.
see what agents can do. And then agents moved us into automation. And
Mm-hmm.
then there'll be something down the road. And there are like brainiacs out there that have already like they're 20 miles ahead of us that we
Yeah.
feel like very, like we feel like idiots around.
Yeah.
But, don't worry. Like
Yep.
what we're talking about is already like so far ahead of where most people are doing. And we're
Yep.
seeing tremendous benefits from it. So don't be intimidated. Just sort of have a beginner's mind, a willingness to fail, willingness
Yep.
to try things, maybe a buddy or somebody in your company who's doing something similar that you can share ideas back and forth with, or
Yeah.
us, you subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to our Substack, reach out.
Yep.
We're happy to help out as best we can.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm excited to, as we kind of continue to grow and learn, to sort of build like a library of the best use cases for automations that just make our lives easier, and maybe we could share that with folks too as we sort of learn it. But I'm sure it depends a little bit on your industry and things like that. But there, I'm sure that for our listeners, if you sit down for 5 minutes and think about the mundane tasks that it would be nice if were just done for you, those are the kinds of places to start and just experiment with.
Yeah, and so just being observant about what you're currently doing, like just looking through your day at the end of the day, say, what did I do that
Mhm.
might be open to an automation? Did I
Yep.
go to one website and pull some piece of information and put it in a spreadsheet?
Right.
Or, this is my life. Like every morning I update our stats from our GA4 Google Analytics.
Yeah.
And so I'm slowly building an automation to do that so
Yeah.
that I have a dashboard that automatically updates itself.
You know, we use an automation scheme for the content of this podcast, actually. So this is a little meta, but we have set up a whole scheme like that I mapped out in a diagram first, and then plugged it into these different tools. But what we do, I'll just walk you guys through what we do. So we record the podcast. This is actually us talking. We're not AI avatars of ourselves yet.
We're not
If we are,
hands drawing
we'll do.
hands yet.
Yeah, not yet. So this is actually Sam and me in the flesh talking to each other. But then we have the recording is obviously transcribed by our podcast recording software. And then the transcript goes through a couple different automations. So one of them pulls out quotes that are suitable for our Twitter feed, and it organizes those quotes into tweets, basically. And then I have an automation that tweets out those quotes onto our Twitter page. So I don't ever have to log into Twitter ever again. I just have it going through this thing, which is amazing. And then another automation takes the transcript and pulls out ideas for Substack posts and gives kind of like a title or an outline or something. Like, I think in the prompt for that assistant, I have the prompt saying something like, what questions arise from this transcript? Like, what did we not cover? What are some gaps and things like that? So the automation goes through our AI assistant, pops out with a couple ideas, and then puts those into a database so that we have like a record of what some new ideas for blog posts could come out of that. And then we have another thread of this automation that puts it through an assistant that helps us create intriguing LinkedIn hooks to reference the podcast. So it's like, here's something you talked about, and here's what it's all about. And then we can link to the podcast. And then I have another one that just extracts the chapters for the YouTube description so that it creates automatic chapters. Because I've done YouTube for 10 years, and the thing I hated the most was having to rewatch my own video and like mark down, okay, at 24 seconds, I start talking about this. At 3 minutes and 22 seconds, I start talking about this. So I have an AI assistant that just reads the transcript and comes up with chapters and spits it out as timestamps that I copy and paste into our YouTube description. So It's amazing.
Awesome.
Like this entire sort of, the circle of life that like our content now can do is just lets us enjoy it more.
Mhm.
And like we have our, we have day jobs, and we want to spend time with our family. So instead of doing a lot of that mundane recycling for our
Mhm.
content, like this just gives us so much more flexibility and fun, like you said, like the play aspect of it.
Right. I mean, the enjoyment is sitting down and talking about a
Yep.
topic, not like the machinations of like cutting and pasting and redeploying
And
and thinking
remembering
through and
where did
remembering.
I write that down? Where did I log it? Like, yeah, where's the ideas for that? Yeah,
And so when,
exactly.
it does take time to set up the system, but then the
Yeah.
system starts running
Hmm.
and then also like it gives us the ability to actually engage with our users rather than just be thinking about creating the next post.
Exactly.
Um, so when I log on to LinkedIn or whatever, I'm able to read comments and respond as me and just, be be
Yeah.
open and honest. I don't have to be thinking all the time.
And so, yeah, related to that, if anybody, if you're listening and this sounds exciting to you and you want some help with it, with it, let us know. Send us an email. Our links are in the show notes, so we're happy to help you.